And now we're on to the CRD meeting procedures, additional information.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded by Director Brice. Director Isitt.
I think there's two items here that I'd like to discuss further. So I don't know if it would be appropriate to try to pull those out, or.
Well, I think we're in discussion of the motion, so it's pertinent to the motion if you bring up the items.
Okay, items 1C and 1E, I think, are both problematic for Yeah, 1C and 1E. I think they're both problematic for different reasons.
Where are you?
Page 5, item 2. So these are changes
So just
to our
read them out one at a time,
Sure, they're
maybe go
changes
through
to
your
our
comments.
procedural bylaw. So item 1C is that request that all delegations submit their comments in writing in advance of the meeting. I think this is an unreasonably onerous requirement to impose on members of the public. They currently have to register, they have to provide a summary of the nature of their remarks and the action they wish us to take. But I think it's enough to allow a member of the public to provide verbal remarks, and to have to prepare that in writing, I think, is a barrier to public participation, and so I don't support that provision.
So just on that point, though, Director Isitt, you said require and impose, and actually the word is request. So it is optional, and it's simply a request.
So I guess the question, from the interest of an efficient government, so if we think of a member of the public, they're being asked, do we really need someone to write us a mini essay? Like, they always could write us a letter. That's always at the discretion of a member of the public. So I guess just wondering the rationale.
Okay.
While I still have the floor, E, I think, is very problematic. Right now, 7 working days notice is required. So to read it out, delete section 22(6)B, which allows a notice of motion to be presented 7 days in advance for consideration at the upcoming meeting. Right now, to my memory, over the last 2.5 years, or 2 and a bit years that I've served on this body, we've had maybe a half dozen motions that directors have provided by way of notice with less than the 1 month period. So it certainly isn't consuming a huge amount of meeting time. And I think the current provision of our bylaw allows for us to deal with emerging issues that arise from time to time. And I haven't seen, I guess, a problem with the status quo. So I don't know, unless we're trying to inhibit the democratic rights of members and participating municipalities, why we would want to take away the right of a director to give their colleagues 7 days notice and have that matter duly considered at the next meeting. But if this is removed, we'll then impose a 1 month delay on any emerging issues to be considered by the board. So I would at a minimum request that these 2 items be referred back, but I think perhaps we could consider disposing of them summarily and adopting all of the other very worthwhile recommendations that the Governance Committee has brought forward to the board today.
So, Director Blackwell.
I'd like to propose an amendment, at least to section 1C, to say that all delegations may submit their comments in writing in advance of the meeting, because I think that was the intent, so that people knew that if they wished, they could put it in writing, and therefore every member of the board would see what their point was, especially in the light that we would be limiting, although I don't know that we've ever gone over the number of delegations, but in case we were limiting the number of people that were allowed to speak at any one meeting, that those people would know that they had the option and the opportunity for all of us to see their comments in writing.
So procedurally, we're into debating. I was going to say, let's get the amendment on the floor first, and that's fair enough. So the amendment, I think, was that we remove the words request that and put delegations may, put in the word may submit their comments. Moved and seconded as an amendment. Discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all in favour? Opposed? The motion carries. Okay. And so now the main motion has been amended. Now we're back on discussion of the main motion. Director Isitt.
Procedurally, now that it's only one matter to deal with, I'm going to move that we strike out item 1E, so that we would preserve the opportunity to provide a notice of motion with 7 days notice rather than 30 days.
Second. Well, I'm glad that we got C amended. That is some comfort, but I still believe that B, limiting the time limit to 4 minutes and a maximum of 15 delegations, is I just believe that that's completely contrary to what our purpose here is. We're here to represent the public. And hearing the public, the only opportunity the public really gets to be able to actually express an opinion other than getting lost in an email campaign is to get up and speak. I don't particularly have an issue with reducing it to 4 minutes. But I don't believe that that's necessary because the chair has the option to reduce it to 3 minutes if there's any kind of numbers. So I think that, again, that the 4 minutes is unnecessary. 5 minutes is okay if you've got a handful of presenters. And if there's more, the chair reduces it. But I think the real key is limiting it to 15. I don't know, in the time that I've been here, if I've ever seen the CRD be less favored than it is right now. I think the general public, for the most part, is fed up with the CRD. And I believe they feel that their ability to influence regional decisions through us is inadequate. And to further deny them the ability to be able to come and speak to an issue of major concern, I think is just reinforcing that message. And this is the absolute wrong time to do that. So I move that item B be struck from this.
Okay, so second by Director Derman, thank you. Discussion on the motion to strike item B, okay. And so we've got a few hands. I had some while Director Rands was speaking, and I'll try and capture everybody else. Okay, so the speaking order at this point is Young, Blackwell, Derman, Hicks. Did I get everybody? Sorry, Brice. Okay, thanks. Until, sorry. And Wergeland. Okay, we're getting there. And is that it? Okay, thank you. Cross. Okay. And you can still put your hands up while people are speaking. So go ahead, Director Young.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I am opposed to the suggestion that we should delete this requirement or this change. Yes, we do have the job of representing the public. More important, we have the job of doing the public's business. And that is that's, in my view, our primary responsibility. If we don't represent the public has a way of getting rid of us. And I think there are many members of the public who don't have the time or don't wish to attend meetings, whose primary interest is in seeing us do the work that we're elected to do. The CRD is different from a municipal council in the sense that directors come from a long way away in some cases. There are practical limits to how long we can meet. The reality in practice is that it is very difficult for us to have meetings that stretch over 3 hours in duration. I think we met for 4 hours, didn't we, this morning at the Quarry Liquid Waste Committee, less some time for getting something to eat, but that's a little bit unusual. The reality is that after 3 hours, we tend to start losing directors. Directors have to catch ferries, they have to drive long distances. So what we have done, or what is being recommended with this motion, is that we devote 1/3 of our time to listening to the public and 2/3 of our time to making decisions and moving forward the business of the public. Now, it is true, we could have said the maximum time limit is 1 hour, and if there's only one speaker, that speaker gets to speak for an hour. If there are two, it's half an hour each, and so forth. And indeed, I think there was one of the regional districts that had some that provision. They had no time limit, but they on individuals, but they had I think we saw a few of them. What we have also heard from members of the public who are making presentations is that they would like some certainty in advance about how long they can speak. They do not like it when they come to a meeting wanting to speak and prepared to speak for 5 minutes and then being told that they can only speak for 3. In the committee deliberations, we tried to strike a compromise, 4 minutes, but that's what people will know they have to speak. But at the same time, we're saying, okay, yes, we have to hear from the public, but we have to have time to do the business of the public. We cannot be put in a position where a large number of members of the public speaking on an issue can essentially bring the business of our board to a halt. And that's the thinking behind this recommendation, and I support it, and I think it should be embodied in our procedures bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Director Young. Director Blackwell.
Thank you. Director Young said most of what I was going to say. The only thing that I wanted to add to that was, oh, now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, it's getting old. It's terrible. Oh, I remember now. When we've had issues like the smoking bylaw or the deer issue, we have set up special meetings where we would go to different areas of the community and allow a whole evening for people to make presentations to us before we had to make a decision on an issue. And so that was why we were thinking with regular issues that come before the board, allow an hour for public participation, 2 hours for us to do our business. And if there was a special circumstance, then we could just simply hold a meeting where it was open to the public and have, in some instances, 2 or 3 locations to have that. And we have done that on a number of occasions. So that was the thinking behind limiting the amount of time we have to listen to the public on a regular basis, but not, if we need to hear more, we hold a special meeting.
Okay, thank you. Director Derman, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm supportive of the motion put forward by Director Rands. I do agree that it would be nice to find a way of standardizing the amount of time that an individual public speaker had to present to the committee or board, because it is frustrating for the public if they put together a presentation for 5 minutes and then are told suddenly they have to readjust it on the fly. And sometimes if they're the first or second speaker up, they have very little time to do that. However, I disagree with Director Young and others when they suggest that our primary concern is dealing with the public's business. Of course we have to do that, but to do that, we have to listen to the public. Do we do that? We already have a reputation, as Director Rands has said in recent time, of going about the business without listening to the public. That's the view that's really pretty commonly and prevalently out there, unfortunately, at this time. This kind of measure that's suggested here will just reinforce that these guys are a black hole that carries on what they want to do in basically isolation. And the last thing we want to do is to reinforce that concept that is out there. You know, if you pass this kind of motion of 15 people maximum, then if you're some kind of interest group on one side of an issue or other, there's a race to be the first 15 people in so that you can all argue your point of view and the people who are on the other side of the position don't get to say anything at all. We just had, yes, we had a 4-hour meeting this morning, as Director Young mentioned. I should point out that in that meeting we had one speaker who took about 4 minutes. So, I mean, the length of the meeting was the agenda and the discussion that took place amongst the committee. There are a few times when we have a lot of people wanting to present. That's because the issue is important to them, and we need to hear that. There are many meetings like today when we don't have a single person come forward. So, fine. But on the average, and if we are having, you know, times when unfortunately directors have to leave, then maybe we'll have to schedule another meeting. I don't like riding home on my bike in December at 5:15. I'd rather leave earlier. But hey, I signed up to listen to the public, to take their comments into account prior to making my decision. And I really can't accept things that limit that ability on the part of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hicks. I'll just go through the list so everybody knows that they're on it or not. Hicks, Brice, Hill, Wergeland, Cross, and Desjardins in that order. Go ahead, Director Hicks.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Wanda Fuca and my two colleagues from the other electoral areas, we have to abide by these same rules as for the CRD board. It applies to local services committee and the commission meetings. So in Port Renfrew, we'll do something with our water commission meeting, and which will be very controversial, and we'll have a lineup of people wanting to speak, and we just can't. We can't limit, as you were suggesting here. We have to have that flexibility. So I totally support Director Rand's motion, because we just can't operate in this restrictive manner in the electoral areas. We have to have flexibilities.
Okay, so just so everybody is working on the same page, the procedures bylaw under Section 3, suspension of rules of procedure. So there is a provision in here that, except for those provisions of this bylaw that are statutorily mandated, the rules of procedure contained in this bylaw may be suspended for a temporary time period specified by the board with a 2/3 vote of those members present. So there is the opportunity to vary procedure as long as it's not a statutory regulation. Anyway, so.
Will I need a lawyer on staff to tell me when I can, or?
I think as long as you can go through the procedures bylaw and the rest of the procedures bylaw, you should be able to handle it. Yeah.
We have
Okay.
confidence in you, Mike.
Director, were you finished, Director Hicks? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Director Brice, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fear this is one of those issues that is attempting to anticipate a probably pretty rare instance, but bubbles to the surface some pretty fundamental issues. When the committee was discussing this, I think you would have to read B and D together. And it was, in the committee's impression, that by having, for instance, a defined time for these meetings, which are in the daytime, unlike oftentimes in our council meetings, we can kind of go on till midnight or well beyond. In accommodating the need to maintain a quorum, that probably it would be advantageous to designate a 3-hour meeting with an opportunity to extend it by motion, and in that reading with that, 1/3 of that meeting would be taken up with input from the public. I can think of a few times, I think the deer issue, the tanning issue, and a couple of others over the years where quorum has been lost and business hasn't been done. I supported this at the committee. I still do support it, but I do worry that it might be sending a signal unintended. A real consideration, I will say, was an attempt to address issues of the regional directors. The one who spoke just before me saying, I don't want that help. So it makes me wonder what the problem is that we're solving and who we're solving it for. So I would not lose any sleep if we took that back to committee and reworked it or addressed the motion that is on the floor. But we were attempting to be mindful of directors that travel a good distance to come here to make decisions. So that's the background.
Okay. So at the moment, the amendment is to remove this section, just so we're all clear. Director Hill?
Thank you, Chair. I happen to be the Vice Chair for, 4 years, and ran the health board, the hospital board, and the planning and transportation file for all those years when it was necessary to handle things like DEER, the extension of the hospital, all of those large issues, the tanning. And there were a couple of occasions when indeed we did lose quorum through that period of 4 years. But the truth is, I see our job is to listen. The number one job for me, and I'm afraid I'm a bit uncomfortable with Director Young's position, the number one position is public trust and public engagement and our ability to listen and willingness to be seen to listen. And so I will be supporting the motion to amend as provided by Director Rands. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wergeland.
Thank you very much. I hear what Director Young is sharing, and myself, as I listen to the public, and I respect what they say, but after I hear 15 speakers, I really do get the gist of what they're trying to tell me. But having said that, I think I would rather see the time restricted, whether it's to 3 minutes, but leave it wide open. If there's 50 speakers, we hear them all. And it comes back to 2 words, public perception and public trust. And I think we have to leave it open. If whoever wants to speak, there is that opportunity, because they just have the one meeting to address the issue on the agenda. And I think we have to allow that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cross.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll be supporting Director Rand's motion as well. One of the concerns I have is the sort of the signal that's sent by such a part of our bylaw or our procedures. And yes, there are ways around it, but it doesn't sound very welcoming or open to the public, encouraging to ask them to come in and speak to us. So for those reasons, I think the wrong message is sent by that particular section. So I will support Director Rand's motion. Thank you.
Director Desjardins.
Thank you. I too will be supporting this motion, and for the number of reasons that others have put forward. I was elected by people to represent them, and by representing them, I have to listen to them. And whether it's at this table or it's in your own table, we have to do that. And by limiting that, it means we miss hearing from some people. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alternate Director Madoff, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I too will be supporting Director Rand's motion. My only proviso is that I do believe we need to provide a context in terms of the amount of time, and that's really as a courtesy to the presenters in terms of them being able to tailor their presentation to the length of time and not have to come and present in an ad hoc way. Much of what I would have said has already been said. How do we represent the public if we don't hear from them? And there are times when issues come up and there's a tremendous amount of public interest, and usually there's a really good reason for that public interest, and that's why we need to make ourselves available to hear from the public. There were 2 examples that were given that would allow for that. One was the opportunity for neighborhood meetings, which I think is fantastic, and the other is the ability to vary the procedure with a 2/3 vote by the directors. But again, those are both discretionary opportunities. They're not the rights of the public in terms of their ability to present. So in terms of our procedure today, I'm not sure with the motion that's on the floor whether we would need to entertain a subsequent motion to deal with time limit, because I think we do need to do that in order to allow the public to present in as comprehensive a way as possible. But I would ask procedurally how best to deal with that, whether we deal with the motion on the floor.
So we do have the motion, which is to remove section B from the main motion. However, Sonia, if I could just ask you, we already have provisions in, so those would remain.
They would remain?
With respect to time limit. And this is not changing anything that isn't listed in this motion.
Okay, thank you.
You could change it to 4 and just take out the maximum.
Well, that's not the motion that's in front of us, so.
No, I know, but if you amend
yes,
the amendment.
Yes.
Well, I would certainly amend the amendment to include the language of 4 minutes.
So that so that we're all clear, so we would be, actually, that's not really an amendment to an amendment. The motion was to remove remove this clause from this motion. So let's deal with that, because it doesn't stop us actually from putting in something else. I think we're overcomplicating. So let's just stick with the motion to remove, if you don't mind. I think, yeah, thank you. We do have a speakers list. I'll get to you, Director Rands. Okay. So Director Hamilton, Brownoff, Alternate Director Roessingh, and then Rands for the second time.
Again, I'll be supporting the motion that sits before us here in the amendment. It is important that we keep in mind what our public has to offer and bring to us, and I think this, limits it. In particular, light of concern of, with our brand new website and stuff up there, it's even more convoluted to get information on there. Just to get to the agenda, I got to go about CRD, document library, committee documents, then to the committee, then to the date, and then it doesn't link easily to any of the reports and that sort of thing. It just seems to be that we're putting all kinds of roadblocks and obstacles in the way of clear communications and opportunities. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Director Brownoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a lot of things have already been said, but I just want to really reiterate, as a member of the committee, we were trying to address two things. One was the confusion that presenters had, that if we had 6 people, then the chair could reduce the speaking time down to 3 minutes. So we wanted to come up with a standard time so that they knew. So as opposed to them thinking it was 5 minutes, and then they showed up and there were more than 6 speakers, and the committee decided, well, there's more than 6 and you're cut down to 3. So that we were trying to address that. And then Director Brice got around to where we were going with the maximum 1/3 of the meeting being for delegations. But we also said things like, if you didn't get a chance to speak to us, your material would be provided to us. There were other things that was offered. I think we were trying to manage that if there was really hot items, then we actually should have a separate meeting to deal with all the public input on it. I mean, I'm willing to support taking this off, but I think we really have to come back and limit the time, because I don't think that's fair to the residents either.
Right. So if we do remove it, obviously it's something that could be further discussion at the Governance Committee, and we have new members of the Governance Committee too who can shed their light at that discussion if we go that route. I have Alternate Director Roessingh, and then Rands for a second.
Oh, thank you. So I'll support the motion. I'm not one who believes that accountability is limited to election time. I do agree that people should know how long their presentation can be. So I would like to see some definite guidelines there. I'm wondering if perhaps there could be guidelines for when an additional meeting or a public consultation can be held, just so the public has some comfort that they'll be heard. But if this is deleted, there's some comfort. But there might be instances where there's just an overwhelming amount of input that really needs to be addressed, and maybe there could be some wording on how it's addressed.
Okay, thank you. Director Rands for a second time.
Well, I understand the problem here. I mean, I've been one of the critics of the problem, where we end up having a meeting go on far too long, and then important issues get either swept away or anything. And so I really appreciate the committee's efforts to address it. I just think that it can be dealt with in better fashion. One of the problems is agenda setting, is that we know in advance. People have to register in advance for these things. So if we know that it's going to be a long meeting, then perhaps the agenda should be adjusted so the important issues are either dealt with immediately or in some other fashion, or not on that particular agenda. We can, because we know in advance, we could have a set time limit. If it goes over 15, let's say, then it could automatically drop. I think we've already had the thing, if it's over 10, that it drops to 3 or something like that. So they can be advised in advance of these things. So I believe that this should, what I made the motion to get rid of it because we're voting on this particular thing today, but it is with the understanding that this particular issue would go back to the Governance Committee, and and then brought back again with, I think, a better approach to achieve what the committee was trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to remove section B? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Director Young in opposition.
Chair?
And Casper?
I think rather than refer this back, I wonder, in terms of meeting management, I think we've had the debate and there's something approaching a consensus. I would prefer that we add the 4 minutes right now and then staff have clear direction about what kind of a bylaw we want to see.
So is that a motion
Yes,
to add
that
to
we add the language, amend the time limit for delegations to 4 minutes.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? Director Desjardins.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that if we're saying 4 minutes, it's going to be 4 minutes, and we're not going to bounce back and forth as we have in the past. Thank you.
3 and 5 would be replaced with 4.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Director Rands.
Well, I'm going to oppose this because I think that it's more complex than that. We've got the 3 minutes already. We can reduce it to 3 minutes if necessary, if there's a lot of people. And as long as they have advance warning, that shouldn't be a problem. If you reduce it to 4 minutes for everybody, then what are you going to do? Reduce it by a minute if you have if you have a backup? There's other complexities that come into this. I think it's better to go back and have the opportunity to discuss it rather than just throw something like this in the last minute.
Let's not get into back and forth here. Director Rands, Sonia, did you wish to comment on this situation?
We've had the 3 and 5 minute rule in place for the last year and a little bit, and staff have identified some challenges with advising the delegations in time so that they can reduce their speaking time to 3 minutes from a 5 minute presentation. The deadline to apply is 4:30 on the Monday before the Wednesday meeting, and we get back to them as soon as we receive the request, but there's sometimes not enough time. And delegations have been advised at the meeting to reduce their time. So we've just identified some challenges with this 3 or 5 minute, just because of the short turnaround time from the deadline to apply.
Okay. So the amendment is still on effect or the motion, that's the motion we're discussing. Director Derman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't see it as problematic to refer it back to the committee. We could bring it forward at the next board meeting to add that. I think then the committee could have a fulsome discussion, and they may come up with a better solution. So I will make a motion that the issue of 4 minutes or time for a delegate to speak to be referred back to the government's committee.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion on the referral to, yes.
I think the committee's given us a recommendation. The majority of directors were pretty clear we didn't want a maximum, but it sounds like the committee has chewed this over, and I think 4 minutes was sensible. In the interest of meeting management and the orderly conduct of our business, I personally like the recommendation for the limit. I didn't like the proposal of a maximum, and that's been dealt with. So okay. I'm not in favor of referral.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion referring it back to the committee? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried with Director Isitt, Alternate Director Madoff. Anybody else opposed? Nobody else want to? You're opposed? Opposed, Director Howe. Thank you. All right, so on the motion, and let's just make sure we're all on the same page. It's as printed in the agenda, except item B has been removed. Item C has been amended to read delegations may submit their comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Item E has been removed, and otherwise I think it's as printed. Okay. On the main motion, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor? I think we just did some committee work here. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thanks, folks. All right, it's tricky stuff when you get into procedures, and no doubt about it. It's a touchy subject, but it is how we operate. So it's good for us to deal with it as a board, I think, to some extent.